Hello chess fans! Today I'm going to be giving a lecture on queen sacrifices, so I'm just going to jump right in. So this first position is a position from the famous Opera House game in which Paul Morphy was against Duke Karl, and it's a really illustrative example of how to use pins, but also I think it's a nice example of where queen sacrifices can be used. You have to identify what is more important than the queen. So pause the video to try and solve this for yourself, but here we can notice that we have this pin and this pin, so we want to put more pressure on the pin. What piece is not putting pressure on the pins? It's the rook. So how do we bring the rook into the game? We sacrifice the rook. And then after here we go rook d1, and now our rook has been brought into the game so that it can put pressure on these pins. Now we saw queen e6, which allows a very nice combination. Pause the video to see if you can find it, which is bishop takes d7, knight takes d7. The whole idea, now the knight's no longer pinned, but the knight is still pinned after queen b8. And then after knight takes b8, rook d8 is checkmate. So now into our second example. This game is called the gold coins game because after this move was played, people showered the board in gold coins. So just a few things to know in this position. Actually, this move is completely unnecessary. Black can pretty much move their queen anywhere and still be winning because they are up a piece. And notice they can't take the rook because of knight f3 check with this fork. So maybe this move is a little bit unnecessary, but here pause the video to see if you can find the move. The move is queen g3. Now first you might think, okay, can't he take with either of these pawns? If he takes with this pawn, then it's knight e2 mate. Oops, sorry. If he takes with this pawn, then it's knight e2, attacking the king. King's only move is king h1, and then rook takes f1 mate. And then if queen takes g3, we have knight e2 attacking the king. King h1, knight takes g3. Notice the pawn can't take because you're pinned. The f pawn can't take because the rook takes f1. And if king g1, we can just take the rook. After he takes our rook, we move our knight away, and notice we're just up a piece and we've traded a lot of material. So this should be good for us. So this is another famous example of where you play a very, very surprising move. Okay, next let's go into another example. This example is much, much harder, and it is an example from the famous game of the century, and it uses a tactic called helicopter. So after that hint, you should probably be able to get it. Okay, so here, pause the video if you haven't seen it. The move is bishop e6. Now, a few things to note about this is it does sacrifice the queen, but it also seemingly sacrifices the knight. But we're not really sacrificing the knight because if we move the queen, we would have lost the knight anyways. So after bishop e6, there's a few moves to consider. Like obviously the number one move to consider is the queen sacrifice, but let's look at each of the other moves. So queen takes e3, we would just go queen takes e5, using the fact that this is pinned, and here you're double pinned, so you're actually just completely lost as white. So you can't take the knight. Next, what happens if you take the bishop? Important to know we have a knight intermediate check, and then after the king moves, then we can have another intermediate check after the king moves. For example, something like this could happen, check and mate, which would be brilliant. But even if we didn't have that, we could just at this point just take here, and then we should be doing we're not down any material, we're actually up a pawn. So he can't take the bishop either, so therefore he had to take the queen. Here Fischer went for this move, bishop takes e4, king g1, and now we have the helicopter. Essentially the knight picks up all the pieces. Notice here if he blocks us with rook d3, like it looks like the queen's defending, but after here you have a takes, attacking the queen. Queen c3 is the only move to keep in contact with the rook, and then here you have this nice move, knight takes f3, attacking the queen and also threatening this e1 square. So for example, if takes here, then rook e1 would be mate, and otherwise you're just losing a queen or you're getting mated. Like there's no way to stay on both. And if the queen goes to a1, then we take on d3, so there would be no way to defend. So we just end up picking up all the material. Then we go knight c3, and then finally we pick up this, and they go queen b4, thinking that, okay, if takes here, maybe they can take our bishop and still be up material. But no, we don't allow that. We go rook a4, attacking the queen, and then after queen takes b6, now we take. And now notice we have two bishops and a rook for the queen, and here Fischer went on to win this game. So this is a nice, brilliant tactic in which you can use your massive lead in development to sort of get a nice advantage, and in this case, he sacrificed the queen. So now we're going to look at our final tactical example. So in this position, I was actually playing white, and some of you may have seen this game before because I actually have analyzed it on the channel, but here, take a few seconds to see if you can find a very nice combination for white. And don't look immediately for queen sacrifice, just try to identify some key aspects. So a few things of note here. Pause the video if you want to try to solve the tactic without hints. A few things of note here is that the king is really, really underdeveloped, so immediately our alarm bell should be ringing for sacrifices. We also see that this rook is undefended, and this queen is pretty poorly placed. It can be hit by d takes c5 in some positions. The knight is also putting pressure here and here, so the knight is a really good piece. And that's all the things of note. So here, pause the video if you still haven't seen it. Here, the move I played was knight b5. And this is a very, very strong move because if takes, then we take the rook. And my opponent went bishop takes b5. I went queen takes b5, a takes b5, rook takes a8. Now, obviously, he doesn't want to go queen d8 because then I take he takes back, and then I fork him with the knight on f7, so he had to go king e7. Then I went bishop g5, attacking the queen, or sorry, attacking the king. Now if he goes f6, which looks like a fork, here I would go rook a8. If he takes the bishop, then I have check, king f6, and a very brilliant mate with rook f7, utilizing all the pieces and just proving why this knight is such a monster. And then he can't even take my knight. So instead of that, my opponent decided to go for this move, knight f6. I still went rook a1, and the only way to prevent mate now is, because I'm threatening checkmate, is to go queen b6 and then sacrifice the queen back. And then here, when you're winning, never get too overconfident. So I went for the best line. Notice that here, the bishop can sort of get out, but after here, he has to block his bishop, and then I take here, and his position is really bad. In this position, he went for rook g8. It pretty much doesn't matter what you play here. I think the idea was that the rook can be defended. f3, h6, bishop d2, threatening bishop b4 and c6, knight d5, takes, and here I saw that the only way I can lose the game is if he goes king e6, check, and then picks up my rook, so I decided to play king f1. In this position, my opponent actually resigned. So yeah, this is another nice sacrifice in which you sort of use the fact that the king has not actually developed. So now I wanted to get into some pretty famous games. So this is the game between Mikhail Tal and Albero. I can't remember what his last name is, but essentially Tal has a lot of active pieces here. The bishop is a monster, the rook's a monster. The queen has the idea of opening up, but one of the main problems here is this move bishop d5, which followed by knight f7 seemingly is game over. So here, Tal played the move rook takes e3. Idea being if queen takes, then, okay, if queen takes, then bishop takes, then he would be completely winning because he's winning the queen. But okay, your opponent doesn't have to capture back here. They played bishop d5, rook, king h8, and then knight f7. And then notice that if I just go back, it's just going to be a draw. And of course, I don't want to draw. Notice they can't block with the rook, obviously, because of just takes here. And now this also defends this, and then takes again. They have time to get this out of the way now. Okay, so they went knight f7. Now we had queen takes f7. So this was a very, very difficult move. Takes, and now we have this move, rook d3. Notice that we want to play bishop takes d4, but we want it to come with tempo. Rook d3, queen e2, now bishop takes d4, king g2, knight e5, attacking the bishop, bring another piece into the game. Notice that if bishop here, then we could just go for this move c6, and now the bishop is actually trapped, because if bishop e4, rook e3. And then if bishop f3, then we could probably just take it. So instead of that, his opponent decided to go for rook d1. Notice that if takes, queen takes, now the queen is attacking the bishop, so we don't have enough time to take their bishop. So instead he went rook e3, again with tempo, queen f1. In this position, the only move to defend was queen d2, keeping pressure on the bishop. But after queen e1, we have bishop e4, king here, and rook f3, again attacking the queen. White has no time, keeping the initiative, queen e2, bishop f5, and after king g2, we have rook f2, winning back the queen. And then notice here the bishop is still hanging, and so if he takes here, we'll take here, and we'll have two pieces for the exchange and a pawn up. And if not, if he moves the bishop, then we have enough time to move our bishop somewhere. Yeah, maybe just bishop b6, and then in this position we should still be doing very well as black. So that was another sacrifice. Now this one was a lot more pure because, okay, you weren't winning by force or anything, but okay, again, a nice beautiful sacrifice in which you can sacrifice your pieces to sort of activate your other pieces, despite the fact that you lose a queen. So now we're just going to look at some aesthetic games. I'm not going to ask you to pause the video too much in these games, but this is a game between Troyanov and Popov, and so we start off with Sicilian and open Sicilian. Often Sicilian can lead to very, very tactical games, especially with its bishop on c4, e6, castles, bishop e7, bishop e3. The idea of bishop e3 is you don't want to be hit by knight takes d5 in some positions, and also you don't want to be hit by a6, b5 in some positions as well. Castles, bishop e3, developing the pieces, a6. Now we see f4 and d5. This is a little bit early. Nowadays, I think the most played move is knight takes d4, and after bishop takes d4, b5 is sort of considered theory in this position, and the position is roughly equal as with every single knight off position on earth. So after f4, instead, his opponent decided to play e5, which is a really bad move because you shouldn't break in the center when all your pieces are underdeveloped. Now, it would actually be a mistake to capture here because then he's able to develop his bishop and things. So you should go for this move e5 because now after the knight moves back, notice that you have way more pieces developed, and also his pieces are all just bad. This bishop is just really bad, and you have a French pretty much down a few tempos. Queen h5 was played here, looking to put pressure on this position. And here, black played a sort of careless move, rook e8, which underestimates white's main idea. Here, black really had to play this move g6, in which case the position is probably still equal after this happens. And notice the queen here is not doing such a good job pressuring f7, but A game continued here like this, and then queen h3, and then, okay, the position was actually not that great for white. Or was it? Okay, it was still pretty good for white, but okay, not amazing. But instead he played rook e8, which allows, pause the video here, brilliant sacrifice, knight takes d5, and after e takes d5, if you said knight takes d5 with this idea, like, you have to see the follow-up move, which is queen takes f7. What a brilliant move. This is just a bolt from the blue, clearly takes, and now there's no way to get in between this diagonal. This is a really important thing to note about the French. Often, sometimes the queen can come to b3 if there's a pawn on c6 with similar tactic ideas. Now king g6 was played, which is a blunder, but if king f8, then check here, check. Not only does he lose the queen, but he loses with tempo, as now we're checking, and then, okay, at least we can win the rook as well. So this would be minimum, and then, okay, we should just be completely winning, as, or maybe we shouldn't take the rook. What should we do here? I'm curious. Knight g5, king here, king f8. Okay, we should just take the rook, and then, okay, we just have an enormous development advantage. But instead he went king g6, and after here, white continues with a series of moves, giving checks every way, and now this nice move, rook h4, another rook sacrifice, and then this is an extremely aesthetic mate. The pawn, bishop, and other bishop are very clutch here in delivering the mate. So now finally we're going to look at an example where white just sacrifices the queen positionally. This is another very, very brilliant game between Nezhmadinov and Chernikov. So game start off with e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, takes. Again, we see it as Sicilian. This is maybe an advertisement to play these Sicilians with bishop c4. They can often lead to very dynamic games. So again, bishop b3 with the same idea that if knight takes e4, there's some center fork trick. So bishop b3, knight g4, and here he took. Knight takes d4, queen h4. Idea being to put pressure here. Queen a5, castles kingside. Because at this point, if you don't castle kingside, you can get in some trouble with like queen a1 ideas, and bishop takes c3. So here bishop f6, and notice that here white doesn't really have any options. If they go here, they get hit by d6. If they go queen h6, then maybe it's just a draw. So it seems like white doesn't have anything better to do, and here might run into tactic like takes, and knight e2. So these are all very, very dangerous things. So what white decided to do here was go for this move, queen takes f6. And actually, if he takes back, this makes a lot of sense, because bishop takes 6 immediately pressures here. The only way to defend it is here, and then at least we're winning another pawn, and the king becomes incredibly weak. Like, for example, if he plays a useless move like a6, this is already like a brilliant checkmate. So that would make sense. But here, black inserted the intermezzo, knight takes knight e2, which after knight takes e2 takes here. Notice we have the same position, except the knight went to e2. So this is obviously not good. After knight c3, now it's black's turn to move. They go rook e8, knight d5, attacking the pawn on f6. Notice that if he takes here, we just take the pawn on f6 with a fork. Rook e6, bishop d4, king g7. Rook d1, idea being to lift the rook to put more pressure on the pin. And this is a very, very pure sacrifice here. Basically, black's dark squared bishop and knight were basically the key defenders of this f6 square and the key defenders of the king. So when we get rid of them, we're left with all our best pieces, and all our pieces are very, very nice. d6, rook d3, bishop d7, rook f3, again putting more pressure, and at this point this pawn is indefensible. The queen is just a horrible defender when it comes to weak squares, because of the fact that we would still win that trade even if the queen traded. For example, if I move like queen d8, this is still a good trade for us because now we are up a pawn. So queen is just a bad defender. Bishop b5, and now here white decided to place move bishop c3, queen d8, and now knight takes f6, threatening all sorts of nasty discoveries. Now if bishop takes f1, we have knight g4, and bishop takes e6, with the idea being to take here. And I'm trying to remember what other move he could play. Yeah, if here, then we just have bishop takes e6, and then this coming next. And if king g8, we could do something like this. And then here, bishop f6, or bishop g7, or knight g8, knight f6 are all coming next. And those should all be decisive game-winning plans. Okay, so instead of that, he went bishop e2, the idea being that now if knight goes anywhere, something goes back. Or sorry, yeah, now if knight goes here, he can block with this. And then if, for example, if knight takes now, you can go here. Or no, this was not the plan. Maybe if, okay, now king takes f8, and now you can take the rook. And then there's no longer a pin here. And here, if they take back, white is actually losing in this position. So that was their idea. So instead of that, we went knight takes h7 check, still attacking the king. Now the king can't go to f8, so the king can either go to g8, or it can go to take the knight, and if takes the knight, then just check here. If here, I mean, minimum is probably takes, g4, queen g5, something like f3, king g8, king here, and then, okay, white should, I assume, be winning, maybe. Okay, it's not incredibly clear. Oh, sorry, rook takes f7 is just completely winning. And then if king g8 takes here, and then you at least are going to win the queen. So, yeah, that was clear. So instead of that, he went king g8, rook takes rook e3, and now rook e5, trying to block the diagonal. But, okay, we have to get the diagonal open because we want to deliver this rook h8 mate move. Takes here, and yeah, notice we don't even take the rook because of the fact that the rook's not going anywhere. Bishop d4, the bishop's more valuable than the rook. b5, just desperation. Knight g5, rook here, bishop takes f7, takes, and now we see a brilliant tactic, rook h8. Notice that if king takes, which was played, takes, now we see a winning endgame, and white went on to convert this position where they have two pieces for exchange and they're up a pawn. But notice also here, if king g8, then we just would take the queen, and the rook is still pinned. Though actually in this position they have this, yeah, and the rook is still pinned after this, and here would be up a piece. So yeah, that's the end of today's video, guys. I know I went really quickly over all these sacrifices, but I highly recommend that if you want to see them more, be sure to pause the video. And if you like this video, please remember to leave a like and subscribe. And I actually gave this lecture in person when I first delivered it, so be sure to check out Dalhousie Chess Club to see any future lectures I give in person. See you guys in the next video.